did was make a group around what we just made, which was this, and then turn off the resultant geometry here, the solid union, because we're going to go in a different direction now. And that different direction, we will need the subdivided surfaces. Probably, I'm going to start with up to about here, up to the point and the list item. And you might as well grab the closest point in the area as well. So copy and paste that and pull it down. So this is what you should have if you turn on the list item. You should have it set up so that this slider will give you the separate faces. Likewise, just a side note here, you can already see that creating louvered facades gets really, really easy when you do box surfaces like this and then subdivide them. Just a heads up.
Wait a minute, what do we turn off?
I turned off everything from the set before, and the only thing I turned on was the list item from the new one. Because I was playing with the slider.
Oh.
Yeah, I was changing what options I was grabbing. Okay, so guys, you should have this, and you can catch up to me on this one if you'd like over time here, but we need to get moving. So the objective for me is to take these faces, probably the front face, the back face, and begin to deconstruct them into points, and we're going to emulate a facade that will triangulate and close. Right, so similar to that facade building that I showed you in the other video. Do I need to pull it up so you know what I mean? Do you recall? I'll pull it up. Something like this. Yeah, that thingy. Al-Bahar Towers, responsive facade. So we'll do something similar to this, but we're going to do it with a square patterning because the triangular patterning one gets a little bit difficult. Okay, so we're going to have an attractor point over somewhere where it says this side is going to be open and that side is going to be closed. Got it? Simple enough. So we're just using that as, you know, an emulation for our goal there. So let's see. We have each of these subdivided surfaces that we can then operate on. We also have, if you copy and paste the list item down and you change this to 0, we have the backside. So this tells us that we can grab the, much like we were doing with the space frame, we can grab the edges, sorry, not the edges, the corners of the backside, and we can grab the centroid of the front side. Simple enough, right? So grabbing the centroid of the front side is really easy. So I'm going to begin with the back side here and pull this down, and we're going to get going trying to move those surfaces. So up here, this list item I'm going to turn off, and we'll focus on the back side. So what we need, go to Surface, Analysis, Deconstruct VREP. And so now we have under vertices, you'll see that they're in packages of 4, right? So each cell has 4 vertices or 4 points at the corners.
This area under the control point? Disconnect
They're still just sitting up top right now. They'll come into play a little bit later on. Don't worry, guys. Don't worry about the control point and area and the original list item right now. We'll need them, but I'm going to leave them there for now.
Mine's still showing the centroid.
You still have the centroid turned on then. Just look back in your previous definitions and turn off. I mean, you could just select everything except for what we're working on right now and turn it all off, and you'd be fine. Everything except for these two. List item and deconstruct brep. And after you've got deconstruct brep, turn list item off too. You don't need it. All right, so moving forward from deconstruct brep, what we have to do is measure the distance. The way I'm going to do it anyway is I'm going to move, or I should say scale, the vector of the location of each of these edge vertices from the centroid of that panel based on its domain-dependent distance from the attractor point. Does that make sense? So much like we just scaled the spheres, or just like we scaled each of the panels, I'm going to say, you know, my minimum, so the closest panel, is basically going to be completely open. So all of the points will move very, very close to the centroid. The ones that are far away are going to be, you know, pretty much closed, and they're going to be almost in their original state where they currently are. Okay? Am I scaring you, Wes?
How do you get one showing and the other one not showing? Because mine are both at 0 and 5, but they're both showing.
I turned it off.
Oh.
Yeah, you turn off list item. That one's a little confusing because it doesn't have like a surface output that makes you think it's an item, but it is. All right. Whew. Lots of explanation, but here we go. So to measure from the centroid of each of these panels to the outside, we need to basically do, well, we got to get the centroid first of all. So we drop in under surface analysis, we grab area, and we plug faces into area. And then from that, we can do a surface 2, or not surface 2 point, vector 2 point to measure, to begin to measure the distance. Yeah. So we go to vector, vector, vector 2 point. So we can take the centroid of each of the panels and measure the vectors to each of the vertices. So here's what I'd like you to do so that you can see what's happening. This is under vector, vector. So that you can see what's happening, go into the display panel, or the display tab, and under the vector panel, go to vector display. And here it's going to ask you for an anchor point, and then it'll ask you for the vector that it's measuring. So the anchor point for us is going to be the centroid, and the vector that it's measuring are these. And this is what you should see. So it'll give you this little lattice work of the vectors that it is actually measuring. Make sense? All right, so slide that one up top. That one's not necessarily going to be used for actual modeling, right, because there's no output. It's just for visibility's sake. So moving forward, we have a couple of options, and this is the part that gets a little bit hairy, and even I haven't quite figured out all the math on it yet. So we're going to do proportional relationships and see what we can come up with here. So if you look above, on closest point. So the closest point measures a distance from the point to the centroid of each of the geometries that we were scaling. And then it remaps it to a domain that we set. So for my purposes, what I want to do is scale the vector. So each of these vectors are going to be scaled, but what we need to do is find the closest point from the attractor point to the centroid, and then scale the vector down for each one based on their current magnitude. So I'm going to copy the point, the closest point, the boundary, remap. Do I want this? I'll keep this. I might play around with that. I'll copy this down and drop it off to the side. All right. So we've got our anchor point here, and the closest points that it's measuring are going to be these centroids, right? So that's going to give us our domain. So this is our boundary domain. It reads from 136 to 520, and that's accurate. And so that's going to be our remap minimum and maximum. So what we want to do here using remap is we're going to scale the vector magnitude. So that vector magnitude right now reads from 0 is the centroid to 1 is the edge vertice. So what we want to do here is kind of remap this. So I'm going to make, well, I'll leave the minimum 0.25 actually. That's okay with me. So I'll say that in no case will our vector be reduced to lower than 0.5. And then the maximum will be 1. So what I want to see here is I want to see you guys get to this point before we move any further. You guys need me to tag those up over here? All right. So I'll stop this here and then we'll move on after this.